talking
public art.
with us, Louise and Laura from Francis Knight Public Art Consultancy.
Conversations with a range of arts practitioners, community activists, planning directors and design teams about how we can make places better by working with artists.
Our role as public art consultants is all about the delicate balance of client expectations to encourage new ways of seeing, developing relationships, connecting people and enabling the creative process.
Today we meet Paul Cowell. As Head of Culture and Libraries at Medway Council, Paul Cowell and his team deliver everything from large-scale events to intimate projects, working with creatives across the Council's galleries, theatres, libraries, green spaces and historic locations.
His background was originally in small-scale theatre, which he fell into while studying a business and management degree at Bradford University, ending up as a producer at Bradford's Theatre in the Mill.
Later, he began working with theatre companies to programme outdoor work, this experience leading him onto a more official role as production coordinator at Bradford Festival, at the time one of the biggest community arts festivals in the UK. It was here that he first began commissioning artists to create temporary outdoor works, which he says was all about creating an environment.
He has now been working in local government for over 20 years and remains a passionate advocate for the arts. It is within this context, he argues, that you really start to see the long-term benefits of creativity, culture and public art in creating strong, healthy, celebratory and resilient neighbourhoods. Welcome, Paul Cowell. Hello, Paul. Welcome to Talking Public Art, Series 2. So we got to know you through our work in Medway, both at Rochester Riverside and the two commissions at Chatham Waterfront. You're Head of Culture and Libraries at Medway Council, but we know your career didn't start in local government. So can you give us a little insight into your career journey? Yeah.
Well, I think like anybody who works in the arts or the creative sector, it's not a normal path that you go down. It's here, there and everywhere, and you kind of land in it and then you realise that it's the place you've always dreamt of and the place you want to be. But it really started for me because of my mum. And so my background originally was kind of theatre and things, and not in any grand way at all, but through my mum being part of an amateur dramatic society. And I used to go down to watch my mum rehearse in comedies and farces and whatever they were putting on, 3 shows a year. Every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, I'd hold my mum's hand and go and sit down and watch all these adults being right stupid and bonkers and playing around in a rehearsal room. Before, 6 weeks later, they'd put on a show in a church hall in front of hundreds of people, and they do that 3 times a year, and there was a big party at the end, and I just loved being there and around people who were, and I guess I didn't know this at the time, but adults who were having fun and enjoying themselves, but actually being really creative and really interesting set of people, and the family built some lifelong friends through Mum being part of that, and that led me into doing theatre at school. Not as a GCSE, but I ended up doing it as an A-level, and I did really well at that. And then I went to university and studied we say study. I went to Bradford University. I went to Bradford University to study business and management because I never saw it as a kind of career for me. That's what took me to Bradford University, because they've got an amazing business school there. And what I didn't realise was that was how ingrained kind of theatre was for me at that point. So I'd done A-levels and I was still doing this amateur stuff. And when you're looking at lists of kind of societies and clubs and stuff, the one that really stood out for me was Bradford University Theatre Group, or BUTG it's called. And it was based at Theatre in the Mill on the university campus. Now, Bradford University doesn't have any arts courses at all. It was a polytechnics, it was a science college. But they had an arts on campus programme. So they had a professional, small-scale black box touring theatre, a music programme and a visual arts centre. And there were these 3 people called fellows who were kind of the artistic directors of these three creative elements of the university. And I went down to the theatre group's auditions and went to hear about them. And fell back into theatre, but at the university. The beautiful thing about Theatre in the Mill was it was also a professional touring house as well. So lots of small scale touring theatre. And if you know touring theatre at all, you know that the small scale stuff is sometimes that is the most exciting, the most the area that pushes the most boundaries, that's the most experimental, that's probably got the youngest, kind of boldest, brightest players come through that small scale touring stuff. And I saw that every week that I was at university, there was another show on. You got to meet the directors and the performers and the producers and everything. And we just threw ourselves into it. And that's why I laughed when I said I went to study a degree in business and management.
I was going to say, that got you through the business studies, did it?
Well, if I'm really honest, I didn't really do that course. I came out with a degree, but I spent as little time as possible.
Yeah.
I started off acting down at the Mill, but ended up producing, and that's what I was doing. And I got some assistant directing jobs, some professional jobs, and it kind of moved on from there, really. And I started working in this professional field through that experience I had at Theatre in the Mill through university, and the fellows in theatre there who really saw something in me and kind of put me forward for opportunities as they came about. So it was really exciting. And I worked at... started working in more theatres, Wakefield Arts Centre, I ran that for a few months, and then Wakefield Theatre Royal and Opera House, the Bradford Alhambra. Started doing outdoor pieces as well, working with theatre companies and programming outdoor work, which led me into my first proper job after my 6 weeks at the Yorkshire Building Society. I know it's not on the CV, but I was there for 6 weeks data inputting.
Listen, we've all done things.
We all need the coin. We need the coin, and I got a job with Bradford Festival as their production coordinator.
Wow.
So using all that producing knowledge, went in as a production coordinator. And Bradford Festival at the time was kind of the biggest community arts festival in the UK, and it used to run a massive Lord Mayor's Carnival Parade with a couple of thousand participants, big city centre programme, and the jewel in the crown was something called Bradford Mellor, which is a big celebration of southeastern heritage and culture within, and it had about 120,000 people attend it, and I was in charge of the production of it. So it was a massive job. I was in my early 20s. I didn't really know what I was doing, but you do it and you learn it and you throw yourself into it. So that's where it really started. And that's, and Bradford Festival itself had so many different aspects to it, a big community education part to it, a big kind of music program and talent development part to it. So I was also learning about all this other work and how that was supporting Bradford being the best it could possibly be, and that's why it's really exciting to see that they've got City of Culture 2025.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was kind of gleaning all this. I could do all the practical stuff. That was great. I could order generators and marquees and draw and get them in a field. But actually learning about the kind of community education side of it, the talent development side of it was really, really exciting as well.
So how does I can see that kind of theatre and that sort of idea of, you're learning all those different skills to then become involved in commissioning artworks in the public realm. How did that kind of...
It is interesting, and the I guess the journey is all about, when you come to festivals and events, it's all about aesthetics, and it's all about placing. Festivals are about showcasing creative talent, and that's not just music on stages or dance performances. That's everything. And for me, and we absolutely did this at Bradford Festival, and Bradford Mellor in particular was around commissioning temporary pieces of public work that would dress our festivals, because it was all about, it wasn't just about sticking a stage in a field and people performing and hoping that people would come. It was about building an environment, creating an environment, and that is everything from the... Yeah, absolutely. And that is much as I probably called it dressing at the time, but actually it was commissioning artists to create big silks that we hang off scaffolding structures, to create giant heads of big Bradford characters that would be on a carnival parade. it's temporary public art, and there is something beautiful about the temporary nature of it. There's something even today, and I've been doing festivals for a million years, that you'll be in a space one day and it'll be full of thousands of people and a stage and stuff, and then 2 days later there'll be nothing there at all, and people will be using it as a park again. There's something really, really magical about that. But it is all about creating an environment, and however temporary it is, it's about creating that. And it does naturally lead on to how you start creating that permanently. And I guess as I've moved into local government, and I've been in local government now for 20 years, that's where you start to be able to see the long-term benefits of creativity and culture and public art in creating kind of strong, healthy, celebratory, resilient neighbourhoods. And public art is really, really important to that, absolutely.
That's quite interesting, because we ask our guests to give us a few examples of some of the work that they like, and we're really struck us about some of the work, the early work that you were involved in. We're talking about sort of permanent pieces as well as temporary works, but the one that was quite interesting to us is the permanent space, Peveril Gardens.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because that's doing similar thing to the festival idea, but it's kind of permanent, isn't it? Are we reading that right, in that the fact that the residents didn't have a space, or
it was a crazy idea, and I was like,
it's fantastic.
You go out to artists and you go, we've got this space. It was Old Kent. It's part of Old Kent Road regeneration programme in Southwark. So the money originally came from the Good Growth Fund, which is a mayoral pot, a GLA pot of money, mayoral pot of money, and the gardens it wasn't a gardens, it was a series of garages, and underneath for the local housing estate. And then on top was supposed to be this kind of communal garden. And essentially it's concrete, it's pebble dashed, it's all the things that the 70s were about. And the garages weren't used as garages for cars. They were used as storage by local residents. So they were full of tut. Some of them, we don't think the doors had been opened for 20 years. And then the garden bit that sits on top of it was just this kind of barren concrete space with weeds and bits of graffiti. And the public access had been closed about 10 years previously as well, because it was just a place where kids would go and hang out, and graffiti and all sorts of other nefarious activities might take place. So it was, and it's right on Bricklayers Roundabout, so it's a really public space, and it's a really is a visible space. There's a flyover, there's a roundabout, there's a flyover that goes over the top, and this space sits right in one corner of it. And the artists saw it, and we showed them around, and we worked with Aldo, a brilliant freelance public art curator as well, who kind of guided us through this. And Sanchez and the team came up with this brilliant idea, and it was relatively simple. It looks relatively simple, but actually it's really, really complicated. So removing those garages just in itself, and getting residents to go, we're not having these garages anymore, hoarders as some of us might be, to get rid of that.
Huge.
But then, punching holes through and creating spaces and visible full glass spaces, trees that run through, punching holes through, and then and then the simplicity of painting it orange, is beautiful. And then the beautiful kind of creative horticulture that went within that space, and giving that kind of permanent access to the public and to visitors as well. So it was a bit of a step for quite a few of us actually to go, this is genuinely a piece of public art, and it's architecture and horticulture led, as opposed to what we might usually see as sculpture or mural or whatever, or work into landscape. But it was genuinely it's incredible.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes, actually, just so that people can kind of have a quick look at that. So that was Peveril Gardens by Sanchez Benton. So, we can see that you're enthused by it, Paul. I've been in a meeting with you before where you've enthusiastically stated to quite a dry panel that I love public art. And I remember sitting in the meeting and thinking, oh my God, music to my ears. So, and we are working with various panels in Medway ourselves. But it'd be really good to know if you could give us an example of some public art that you love, and that could be work that you've experienced yourself or commissioned yourself. And I know you've given us a couple of examples.
I've given you some examples.
Maybe, yeah.
So I love a pavilion.
Ooh,
I love a pavilion. And again, it's that temporary nature of stuff, but it's something that's so impactful that it sits in people's memories forever. And the first one there've been lots at the Serpentine that I've been to and have been beautiful. I've gone, but they spent millions and millions of pounds on those. The first one I went to that I genuinely felt was kind of less hierarchical in its kind of people felt comfortable within the space was Yinka's Colour Palace at Dulwich Picture Gallery. Genuinely, it's a lot more open space. So you don't feel quite as, some people don't feel comfortable in kind of gallery environments or theatre environments, but it's in a big open space. And when I was there a few times, and it was genuinely a place of attraction for all sorts of different people from different areas of Southwark. And Southwark is a really diverse place with lots of different challenges. But genuinely, I felt as if it was people were encouraged to be there because it was a beautiful open space. Also because Yinka is an artist of colour as well. So there was an absolute reference there to significant proportions of the population of Southwark. But it is just freaking beautiful, absolutely beautiful and usable. And you sit in it and you're bathed in all these beautiful colours. And as the sun moves around it, the shadows that it spells everywhere are just incredible. And it's the first kind of pavilion I felt that achieved probably, sorry, Serpentine, more than the Serpentine pavilions had achieved in quite a while because of its nature and its construction and its colour and Yinka and all that as well. And so I've been obsessed with pavilions for ages and always wanted to see whether I could commission one myself. And then I managed to find a bit of money a couple of years back. As we were coming out of lockdown, when I met with, actually before lockdown, and I just started in this job at Medway, I met with Helen and Chris from Lucid Create, who are a local a creative company who make large-scale installations, quite industrial, really, digital-led, big steel but beautiful objects that they create, and they were telling me they'd never done any work in Medway, and they travel all around the world.
They're based in Medway, aren't they?
Yeah,
They're
they are.
Sittingbourne. They're Sittingbourne.
Well, they're about half a mile outside of Medway, so I'm like, there's a grey area, I don't care. But they'd never done any work in Medway, and they take their stuff internationally, and they make massive stages at Glastonbury and at Leeds Festival and installations at Soho House, and and they'd never done anything here. So I was like, okay, come up with an idea for a pavilion for me. And at that point, I didn't have any money, and I was like, oh my God, what have I just asked them to do? And literally 2 days later, Chris emailed me this thing. He said, I've just been throwing these ideas about, but this is what we're thinking of. What do you think? And I loved it. It's called Together. It's a series of circles on structures with these these digital screens on the inside that project words and light and all sorts of stuff. But it's I didn't realise how big it was until they started putting it up, because they go, oh, it's this big, and I'm like, okay, but it's difficult to visualise. And then when you see it going in place, you're like, okay, that's. But it created this space that was absolutely beautiful and wonderful, and they'd commissioned a sound artist, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, and I think he was from Canada, and did this beautiful soundscape. So you sat in the middle, or you were in the middle of these circles surrounding you, and this soundscape just washed over you. And it was so beautiful and therapeutic and kind of relaxing, like being in your very own yoga massage pool. It was just incredible. And then we worked with Ideas Test, who are our Creative People and Places program, Arts Council funded program. And they worked with a program of theirs where they'd been writing kind of poetry and prose about being in Medway and about life during COVID, and these words were displayed on the inner of the circles, and it was everything I wanted it to be. I mean, it wasn't cheap, but these things never are. No. But the experience of it and
it's the value of what it brings, though, isn't it, Paul?
It's everybody. I've not heard one bad thing about it. Everybody has said how magical it was, and that they'd never seen anything like this before in Medway.
And what strikes us is that you've got a combination of your community engagement, which is kind of core to that piece. You know, it's experiential and it was temporary, and it's all those things that you've been talking about. A little bit like theatre in itself. You've commissioned a piece that people can immerse themselves in. You know, have a moment and remember that moment. And for us, that's public art kind of creates that. You create your own moment, don't you? It's your response to that piece. And we saw, unfortunately, we didn't make it to the site, but we saw some beautiful photographs because
you know, the media coverage. The media coverage has far paid for the cost of the thing. You just because the images are beautiful, and then because we did it as a co-commission with Culture Liverpool as well. So that was a first. You know, Liverpool have come out of their European capital of culture and have just sped away in terms of what they're doing up there, and it's absolutely incredible. So actually, for Lucid Creates to bring us together to go, let's fund this together. And now it's you know, I think it's going back to Leeds Festival. It's used as a stage. They stick a DJ in the middle and people dance in it. You know, it's got a life of its own, and it will always have kind of Medway Council stuck next to it.
And also locally based poets and writers seeing their words up above them and people responding to those. That's quite incredible as an artist, you know, for their work to be in the public realm as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we do love a bit of text in public art.
Oh yes, now because you'll see, because you know that there's one of my other favourite pieces that's quite new is Anthony Burrell and Laura Wellington's You and Me in Leeds. And as soon as I saw a picture of this, I was like, God, I wish we had that. Oh, I'm so annoyed. So annoyed, but so happy for Leeds. I've got lots of friends up in Leeds and Bradford. And I just love it. It is so stark, but the words mean everything. And it's at such a scale that reaches over that part of Leeds. I think it's just inspiring. I could sit I could sit in front of it for hours.
I think that's the nature of Anthony's work as well, isn't it? That, you know, the word, the phrases that he uses. Well, that's his practice. I mean, and it does. It just means so much to so many different people. You can interpret it in so many ways, but it's so simple. Yeah, and
it's very similar to Mark Titchener's work, which is again. Words and imagery and how it's portrayed visually, and I love Mark Titchener's work, but I love that idea because words mean a lot. Words mean a lot to people, and I think there can be something really powerful, but really reflective and really kind of vulnerable and emotional about words. It's in the simplicity that Anthony and Mark use them. That wherever you're from, whatever your cultural background, your heritage background, whatever your personal circumstances, the right words in the right way can really make a difference to you. And I love that.
Mark Titchener's work is totally beautiful. I mean, we've seen that, we've been there, and we were just looking at the pictures before we spoke to you. And the words, which just are circular, and you can read them how you want, really. But obviously the space is stunning, and then the work is reflective, and it reflects back on itself. And but it's interesting, you see people walking through it. Do they look up? Do they look up and see that work that's above them? It's just this stunning
I guess
piece of
for
artwork.
me, people will notice that there are these beautiful kind of chandeliers, and it's a beautiful piece, and it's Hear Me Now, and it's at London Bridge. and it's these beautiful chandeliers. So people might not see the words, and I don't think it matters, because some people will. And when those people do see it, they will stop and they'll read them, and they'll go, there are 3 or 4 of them, and they will spend time. Another, just one person stood looking up at them will mean another person will be like, what are they looking at?
Yeah.
And what are they looking at? And actually it would, so and I think with permanent public, it's like the Chatham placemaking work. People walk through it every day. And how many of them have read that work and read, and seen and appreciated all the way, and I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. I've got a new member of staff and we were walking through Chatham, and I was like, oh, and this is happening here. Oh, and don't forget to look at the floor, because there's all this work here as well. But I think every now and again, everybody will notice it and recognise it. Not every day, every time, but they'll pick up, there'll be a certain word that will pop out at them because they're thinking about something particular at that moment.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it has this, it has this kind of built-in impact.
Well, there's a built-in history there as well, because it's so well researched, that work by Christopher Tipping, that a lot of the words reference, it encourage you almost to look up at buildings as well. If you know a little bit more about it, the references are about the retailers that used to be there, the military history that the high street is kind of through the retailers. So it's so nuanced but loaded, and there's so much there. If you just spend a little bit of time in that environment and notice, there'll be so much that you'll pick up from it, and people will do. People do. So,
And we we all know that that commissioning public art. I mean, those pieces in the ground in Chatham, it's fantastic. But behind the scenes, there's been a few challenges and things that we've had that as public commissioners we have to do. So my question is a little bit about bugbears, I'm afraid, but it's more about the commissioning process. And you've talked very passionately about commissioning those temporary pieces of work, and also doing permanent pieces within Medway. What's the challenge of commissioning public art within a local authority?
Have we got long enough? No.
It's another podcast, isn't
I think
it?
It's a whole. It's another season. A whole season 3, the local government series. Yeah,
I think we might do that.
Do you know what? The challenge, the first challenge is about priorities. So, local authorities these days have so much pressure on them to deliver so much to so many people, especially the most vulnerable people in our towns and cities. And the pressure on the budgets that local authorities have are greater than ever. So even 10 years ago, when we were going through, the start of austerity and kind of, most councils have had 30, 40, if not 50% cuts over the past 10 years. That is crazy. It is crazy, because the things that stop being funded are the non-statutory services. And the non-statutory services are often the services that support people going into statutory measures. So whether that is through health or whether that's through housing, or, I guess the only statutory service that has a really great supporting role is the library service for me, in terms of in a creative cultural context, because library services are statutory, but it's never we have to deliver some sort of library service. It doesn't go down into the detail of what that is. But Medway has been supporting culture and both on a kind of project and program level and as capital programs for a long time. So there's a good history of it. But again, priorities within capital programs, and what we're seeing at the moment is that the cost of build. So you get a big development project. We're building X amount of new homes, and there'll be a portion within the planning conditions to create public art. Fantastic. We've got that line in. We are winning. Brilliant. But then what we see is, and we're seeing it at the moment, and I'm seeing it with the two of you, is that the increase in costs of the building means that some things are becoming less and less viable. And the things that are squeezed are the things that people think are nice and not necessary. So my battle, that's rather confrontational. My challenge is to get people to acknowledge that this isn't nice, this is necessary. So you can build buildings, and you can put up as much glass and concrete or bricks and mortar as you want. But what you won't get is a community, and what you won't get is a strong community, supportive community that supports each other in a whole range of different ways, through being neighbours, through creating true neighbourhoods where communities support each other. Because what that comes back to is then they always come to somebody else to support them, and that comes back to council and the NHS and blah blah blah. Actually, we know that communities that work together and are mutually supportive are stronger and more resilient and healthier, and grow and prosper on all sorts of different levels. And the environment that you create is not an option for me. It has to be the best environment. And whether that's through greening places, or making sure that landscaping and there are public areas and playgrounds and places for kids, affordable, rents for shops, to, for your bakery or your local newsagents or whatever. But also public art plays a really, really important part in that, in kind of building that environment. And that's what's really important for me. And so it's all about priorities and where, and it all comes down to money at the end of the day.
Yeah, it does.
So it's really easy for me to go, here's £200,000 for some public art, and we all go, yes, that's brilliant. But what we're seeing at the moment is developers coming back to us going, well, actually, the price over here of this concrete has increased by 100%. We can only give you £50,000 for the public art.
Yeah.
It's
And
something that we come across all the time. Paul,
Yeah.
Anyway,
It must be your
clients.
biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's the priority
Yeah.
that they see.
It's one of our biggest challenges, but also I was interested in one of your answers to that question, which was about thinking expansively about what public art is and what form it takes. It's not only is it securing the budget for it and thinking about the longevity of a piece, because that maintenance is the kind of huge part of that process.
Yeah.
But also the ideas that we bring forward in the first place, know, what we are commissioning, what people perceive as public art.
Yeah, and I think that the principle of public art has expanded so massively in the past 10, 15, 20 years. And we've seen that in some of the examples we've been talking about today is, people used to think of public art as a statue on a plinth or a graffiti wall. And we know that is not the case anymore. And there is evidence to show how public art supports strong communities and great places to live in. But I think sometimes what I would always encourage artists to do is to think more expansively about what public art can be, because we too often go back to those kind of 90s, principles. Yeah, and actually, I want to see bold, and I want to see bright, and I want to see interesting. I don't want to necessarily see the same old, because every place wants to, and the word, iconic and, is bandied around, but actually you want something that really represents a place, and every place is unique and different, and that's generally because of the history and the heritage of a place. But using that in a contemporary form is really, really exciting. And I think I'm sometimes, why I said think expansively, because I think sometimes artists don't think expansively enough. And what I want them to do is to, I get kind of responses back to briefs, and probably 50% of them I'm like, well, that's just, it feels like I've seen it before 1,000 times. But when you see the submissions, and the ones that you want to pursue, because they are standout and because there is something to them. And it might be the engagement with it, it might be the delivery of it, or the materials that they use, or the positioning of it, or the use of natural elements and the sunlight. It could be something that gives it a uniqueness that you've never seen anywhere else before.
I think artists, they push buttons as well. They can push boundaries. they say things sometimes we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And that's really important for them to have that space to do that.
Yeah, we are not the culture
and
police.
I think, and I think the challenge is that comes in as well when we're working with commissions and clients as well, is trying to interpret that in a manner that they can understand, but they're not going to go, oh no we can't do that.
Yeah,
because
I suppose what I'm quite interested in is, whilst you're thinking about the artist thinking more expansively within local authority, do you come across that as an issue? Do you do people, could talk councillors, you could talk senior management, decision makers, I suppose, are they thinking expansively about what public art
I mean,
is?
that is my responsibility, absolutely, is to make sure, because you're right, the at the end of the day, decision won't be mine. The decision will likely be a senior councillor, who will make the decision at the end of the day. So it's my job to make sure that, yes, you're absolutely right, those decision makers are kind of broad in their thinking, absolutely, as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, I think when I talk about thinking expansively, I think one of the things in Medway that we need to do more of is for local artists to see the extent of what can be achieved, given the right money and the right support and advice around them. And I think sometimes there's a nervousness about how far you can step, or how maybe controversial you can be, and I see that happening in Medway now, where people are really, really evolving their practice, working at bigger and bigger scale, sometimes in a more permanent scale as opposed to the temporary sort of stuff. And that's really exciting to see. And I think, we're all learning all the time. And, I follow people on Instagram and wherever, and I'm coming across new pieces. I mean, there is some extraordinary work out there internationally, just mind-blowing. And some of the digital work is absolutely incredible, and we're all learning all the time, and we're all trying to expand our kind of view and vision of what public art can be, and it's tremendous.
We say every single project we learn on, every single project,
God,
everything's so different. We kind of look back and go, okay, we could have done this slightly.
Why didn't we ask that question?
So, how does a public art consultancy like Francis Knight help in these situations, these commissioning, this commissioning, and how do we help?
Well,
how can we help?
Working with you currently, and I've worked with others. I mentioned Aldo earlier, and I think what some people don't understand about public art is the detail that has to be gone into to make a piece work. That it's not as simple as, I don't know what people think it might be, but painting a wall or whatever it is. It's not like painting a room in your house. It is, the process is a lot more complicated, and where consultants, where people like yourselves really help and support, is to have the eye on that detail throughout. Well, I guess it's even at the start of that let's start at the start of the commissioning process, is helping to refine the thinking of somebody like me, who's like, we've got a bit of money, here's a place, to help us refine our thinking in what the possibilities are within that space, and to develop a brief that is open enough but gives enough information for us to get a series of great creative responses. And then reaching out to those artists that you think, that you've experienced before, or you've seen before, and some that I've seen before, just to get that out, but to really to help refine our thinking on that. And and you've mentioned it earlier, is that I'm a great believer in a kind of community engagement process with it, however small or large that can be, depending on the project. And certainly think that publicly funded public art should have has a responsibility to the community that it's serving, and therefore the community should be involved in the decision making of what it should be. And so working through what that means and how it works, because it can work in lots and lots of different ways, but really helping to shape and form that. Timescales, all of that, and then looking at, kind of longer term, not just the kind of fabrication and installation, which again is detailed and complex. If you're in a public space or on the side of a building or whatever, they are complicated engineering feats, and we work with specialists in those fields. But it's long and it's detailed, and everybody has to be on board when that first drill is holed into it. Hole is drilled into a wall or whatever. But then there's, and we talked about it earlier, was just this kind of the longevity of a piece,
life afterwards.
Exactly, and the life of it, and we need to have, and you can advise on, and what specialist services we need to ensure that piece of public work lasts as long as possible, or lasts as long as we've agreed it will last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and how we do that. So actually we build that into those ongoing budgets really, really early on, and we really secure that piece for the community. So there's a lot of detail and a lot of work that goes into it. I don't think everybody quite understands that.
Well, it's quite interesting. Often on projects, we're the only constant. We'll be on a project for so long.
I can imagine.
And people kind of come and go, but we're here and we keep bringing it back. Go, hey, public art, hello. This needs to go in there. This is the timeline. You need to keep to this. There's an artist here. They need paying. So we're the ones kind of knocking
the
on
important
people's
bit.
doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, thank you.
But I guess, I'm going to ask you the question of, we ask every guest, if you could do anything, any piece of public art, I gave you a huge budget. In fact, I just said to you, Paul, right, just do something that you want to do. What sort of thing would you be commissioning?
So I'm going to talk about two. I'm going to talk about two. So my first one is, because I worked in Southwark, and Southwark sits opposite City of London, so along the South Bank.
Yeah.
And as a kid, my grandma used to knit squares, and then you'd send them in, and they'd be stitched together, and they'd be sent to places that needed blankets,
Yeah.
And what I'd really like to do is to everybody to knit some squares so we can create a giant bobble hat, like the biggest bobble hat in the world. And then in Trafalgar Square, we make the biggest bobble, the circles that you wrap wool around, the biggest circles, and then we stitch. So, and I'll tell you, the scale of this will come apparent very soon.
Okay.
A Chinook helicopter will then lift this giant bobble hat and place it on the top of St Paul's Cathedral.
Oh, wow.
All about raising awareness of, charities like Age UK and raising money for services for older people and, some of the most vulnerable we have in our communities.
Yeah.
But just a giant bobble hat done in a big public way. So that's one. I've had that for 1,000 years. But the one I'm on at the moment, moving on from bobble hats in this heat, well, the one I'm on at the moment is, and this is all about, the River Medway. So the River Medway is the reason that Medway exists, and it flows through, a lot through Kent, through Maidstone and all sorts. What I'd love to see in the kind of the Medway Towns area of Medway is to see a river-based public art trail that can only be properly seen if you're on the river.
Ooh.
So for me, this is about, so we are, there are lots of conversations at the moment. The river was kind of the lifeblood of Medway and Chatham and Gillingham for many, many years with the docks, the shipbuilding and all that, 400 years worth of history. And then the docks closed in 1984. And actually, apart from a lot of the kind of industrial use of the river disappeared, there's a bit of it still, but mostly it's kind of leisure function at the moment. So you see, Chatham Marina and Gillingham Marina are full of leisure boats, and at Rochester, and it's really lovely and it's brilliant. So there is still quite a bit of use of the river, but it's declined a lot. So what we're looking at is how we can make the river kind of bring back the river into our daily lives, because it is wonderful and beautiful. And so one of the things I'd like to do is to bring this, and we're talking about 10, 20 pieces over 20 years based around strategic points, and this works with, we've got a lot of riverside development happening. It's a lot of industrial estates with some big businesses on them. So we talk about riverside living and all sorts of things. So working with on Rochester Riverside, you're doing this within the landscape. But what I'd love to see are some really great pieces along the river, all the way around to and past kind of Gillingham and Riverside Country Park and stuff like that. I don't know what that is, but it's an increment. It'd be an incremental thing. We wouldn't do them all at the same time, but you'd build on it, and you'd build. There'd be different ways that you'd fund different pieces as the opportunities arose. But I'd love to do something that was, there'd be a whole tour that was kind of river focused. You still see them all from the land and see them all individually, but actually the full impact of it is from being on the river. And
yeah, wonderful. Well, sounds amazing. So just to kind of finish off our conversation, our last question we also ask to every guest is, can you tell us at least one little fact about yourself that we might not have already guessed, Paul?
I don't know, you might have guessed. I don't know. So in my early university years, and I'm trying to remember how this actually happened, I think there was a group of us at the university, and we were dared to do this, and so we did, for a one-off gig, performers take that, and we just called ourselves Take That in this little performance, and we learnt some dances, and we sang some backing tracks and did all the dances, and we had a Lulu. So we did We Like My Fire, and we had our own Lulu, and she came on, and we did that, and it got a massive response.
Who were you, Paul?
Yeah, so I was Gary, because I can sing a little bit, and we became Take This, kind of a proper tribute band, only for a couple of years, and we mostly played in and around Bradford University and kind of West Yorkshire and stuff like that. And it was weird because we never played for money, we only played for beer. Which is, I presume, why we got the bookings. But there you go. Yeah, I was.
That was good fun, though, wasn't it? Was it good fun? It must be good fun.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, amazing. All that beer, singing Take That songs. Yeah.
Oh,
fantastic. We had photo shoots and everything. The whole thing. We once even had, in one gig, there was a little booth set up where we would sign autographs for people. It was bananas. Absolutely bananas. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely love it. Oh, it's been great chatting to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's just been such a nice to have a conversation about, our world, really, public art world, which we often just chat to ourselves about and try and kind of plough through the as you say, challenges with, commissioning public art. But we love it. We absolutely love our job, and you sound like you love your job too. So,
yeah, absolutely.
It's been great to chat to you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Engaged, creative, curious, courageous and valued, Francis Knight is an award-winning independent public art consultancy based in South East England with over 16 years' experience offering expert advice and management in commissioning high-quality art for the public realm. As co-founders and directors of the business, Louise Francis and Laura Knight commission professional artists from across the UK to create ambitious public realm artworks in a variety of locations. The consultancy partners closely with housing developers, design teams, social housing associations and local authorities, together with a wide range of community groups, to create brave, ambitious, thought-provoking art for public spaces.
Over this series of podcasts, we will be looking at different ways that developers can engage with artists as part of a design team, and how, if it's done right, these working relationships can lead to meaningful, lasting and joyous contributions to our townscapes and landscapes. In our next episode, we talk to Caroline Hicks, Director of Growth and Community for Dartford Borough Council, about the days when local authorities still had money, getting young creatives into Canterbury Market, commissioning bronze sculptures of Mick and Keith for Dartford Town Centre, and the fear of a blank canvas and stretchy parameters.
Plus capturing the magic, measuring well, and glass fusing. If you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you could rate, review and subscribe to our podcasts. It helps us spread the word on demystifying public art.